Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the round table. We are three of us are the team from staffagency.com. We've got Karen and Josh and myself. We are Karen and Josh are managing directors. So actually, excuse me, Josh is president. Karen's managing director. I am the CEO and co-founder. And we have Sedrik Newbern with us today, who is a dear friend and also the entrepreneur in residence at Western Kentucky University. Additionally, he is a business consultant, and Sedrik and I have known each other for over 2 decades now, actually, which is like, wow, that makes us really old. And so
seasoned.
Right? Oh, that's right. We're seasoned. We're wise. We're wise.
We're wise. There you go.
Right. We're wise. So what we wanted to talk about today is multi-generational diversity. And what this means is that at no other time in history have there been so many generations that are in the workforce. And how this affects you if you are a manager, a leader, or a company owner, or C-suite in a company, HR in a company, or even a person within the company, is that there's a richness to be had with all the different generations in the workforce at the same time. However, if the company is not really actively looking to engage and make multi-generational diversity and inclusion and all of that like a part of their culture, then it can become very polarizing, and it can become, almost kind of toxic to some of the generations as they're trying to be in the workforce. So we really wanted to just break down, like, what does it mean that all the generations are in the workforce at the same time? And this goes like from boomers all the way to alpha, which is kind of the youngest generation that's going right now. So it's like boomers and Gen X and millennials and Gen Z and alpha. And you have older folks, seasoned, and even more seasoned than us is the boomers. And then you have the alpha, who is like that younger generation that is kind of the younger part of the workforce now. And as we move forward into the future, it will be more of the workforce. So what happens is you have managers, leaders, and ownership and all of that might be a boomer or a Gen X, like myself and said. And we have a particular style that we were taught on how to lead and how to manage. And so if we had our heads in the sand and we weren't paying attention to what's happening in the world and keeping up with learning about new constructs, new ideas, new methodologies, then we would very much probably be failing if we were trying to lead a company in the old ways of leadership. Because the old way of leadership said, it's my way or the highway. It's too bad for you. We're doing it this way. Nobody cares about your feelings. We don't care if you like it or not. We're just doing it. And they wouldn't ask you. They would tell you. Yes. And that's how it used to be. And now people care about feelings, and people care about taking care of themselves, and they care about what is the company doing to take care of, I was going to say the universe, but to take care of the world. Like, what is the why of the company? What is the why of the management? You never heard questions like this when Sedrik and I were growing up. Nobody cared about why. Just do your job. Shut your mouth, do your job. That's it. That's the way it used to be. So because Sedrik has his hands right in there with the younger generation, because he is a professor in residence at the entrepreneur in residence at Western Kentucky University, and he teaches, I thought he would be a great person to talk to us about, about all of this and kind of from his perspective, what he's seeing. So go ahead, jump right in.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always fun. Anytime I get an email or a text message or a call from Noelle, I say yes first and then ask, what is it? Because I know that it's going to be a fun ride. But, you really nailed it on the head. I think, there's been a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think oftentimes people only view that in the light of the complexion of your skin.
Yeah.
or, your sexual orientation or
Right.
whatever, some of those traditional, but they don't think about some of the big challenges that I think you and I faced when we entered the workforce. So, for example, I remember my first internship in 1990. I had to wear a suit and a tie. I could not wear my earring. I had just gotten my ear pierced. I was an 18-year-old college student with an earring, and I could not wear an earring to work. I had to take my earring off and leave it in the car.
Yeah.
I had to shave every
Yep.
single day, and I didn't even have this little patch. You can't see it now because it's more gray than it is black. But the facial hair, it was almost a no-no. You didn't wear colorful things, even though this was the back end of the 80s. There was a very rigid approach to how you were supposed to dress and how you were
Yep.
to behave. And when you showed up in the meetings, you didn't say anything as the junior associate. You just sat in the back, you listened, and if you had a thought, you had a question, or you had a concern, you had to go to your supervisor who was in the room and say something to them on a break or
Yep.
after the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays, and I want to put this in perspective. As a baby boomer raised me as a Gen Xer, there were certain things that happened in my household. Just like we described in the workplace, it was the same in the home. You didn't question your parents. You did
Hmm.
what you were told, even if it was the wrong thing. If they were wrong, they never admitted to being wrong. They
Hmm.
never took accountability for being wrong. They never apologized for being wrong.
Right.
All they did was said, suck it up. We're going to do this and da da da. And that was all you got.
Yep.
Well, as a Gen Xer and having kids, I said, no, I want my child to have a voice. I want my child to be able to speak their emotions. I don't want to disregard their feelings and so forth. And so we've raised our son to be, although we were late to have kids, we've raised our son to be a very thoughtful young man, very open about his feelings.
Hmm.
He's very respectful, but yet will and sometimes challenge us to say, well, mom, why do you say that that's what's important? Dad, why do I need to do it this way? Why can't I do it that way?
Yeah.
Well, this is our new workforce.
Yes.
This is who we are hiring. This is
Yeah.
who I'm teaching. And the other challenge that I think we have is that we're doing to this next generation the same thing that was done to us. These kids, they don't know anything. They haven't paid their dues. They're still wet behind the ear. They have no idea what they're talking about. I can tell you just this morning, I was texting with a young man that graduated just last year. I'm bringing him in to judge a pitch competition for my students. He's working on an app for financial literacy.
Wow.
He's 21 and
Wow.
he's already gone out. He's almost at the MVP stage. He's
Wow.
seeking funders to help support this so that he can launch it, because he identified as a freshman one of the biggest challenges that college students have is not understanding money coming from
It's
high school.
true. Yeah, no, my son says the same thing,
Yeah,
that, they really should be teaching that. And my son's 22 as well, but said the same
absolutely.
thing. Like, they don't teach that in
No,
school. They don't,
they don't.
they don't talk about that. And that's, that isn't a good thing, to your point,
Yeah.
at
And
all.
and and again, this young man is no different than, I teach on average 120 students a semester. And out of the 120, there's probably 100 that are just like the same young man,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There may be a few that do fall in that category that we've talked about, like, yeah, I don't know about you. Hopefully you can live at home for a little while until you get things figured out. Don't cross the street by yourself. But
Right.
by and large, these young people are brilliant. They are
Yeah.
beyond intelligent. They,
Yeah.
in fact, have grown up with technology that us dinosaurs are still trying to figure out. My cousin's son, who's on the spectrum, has a famous saying: every time there's something goofy with technology, it says, technology in the hands of a dinosaur.
Yeah.
These young people have grown up with technology, so they understand how to use it, how it can benefit them. Whereas we're still trying to figure out, now what happens, if I can't get this cursor to move.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of misconceptions that
Hmm.
we have, and if we are really honest with ourselves as Gen Xers, especially if we're honest with ourselves, We know what it was like when we entered the workforce, and we should stop treating the new entrants the same way we were treated, because we know the talent that we brought and we know how we were dismissed. And we
Yeah.
got to find a way that we are open to all suggestions, because these young people, they're going out and they're starting businesses and they're saying, I'm not dedicating my life to help somebody else get rich. I'm not giving up my freedom, because
Yeah.
I like my schedule. I like to do what I have to do, and so therefore I am going to go and start my own business and do things my own way. So I
Right.
think I think as we look at multi-generational workforce as leaders, we have to understand that that is very important. And you also touched on it. They also want to know, what are you doing as a corporate citizen?
Yeah.
Many students are now looking at your website to figure out, are you just posting that you've given, some food at a food pantry around Thanksgiving, and that's all you do for the community? Are you true, or are you truly invested in making a difference in people's lives? Because that's what they want to do. That's
Right.
very important to them. And
Right.
we don't, again, the boomers, they were, it was the me generation. I've got to make all the money. I'm going to keep it for myself. I might pass it on to the next generation, but I've worked hard. You got to work hard too, as opposed to, how can we collectively make the world a better place? And that's where I think our millennials are really, frankly, changing the paradigm for business in
Yeah.
this country, at least.
Okay, so before I comment on all that, let's see what Karen and Josh have to say, because they see this from a little bit. They see all different things because they're constantly interviewing and, going after candidates and talking with HR directors and, companies about, the difficulties with hiring and who needs to be recruited and all that. So, Josh, what are you seeing in regards to just all of this? What are some of the things that you see?
Yeah, I see it the way you speak to people. It's, because us as a core, we are recruiters, right? That's our business. We're in recruiting, we recruit. So you're speaking to someone, you could be speaking to someone that's 18 years old, you could be speaking to someone that's 85 years old on any given day. Doesn't, we have no idea who we're speaking to when we talk to them. And you hear like the conversations change, the way you're speaking to someone who's a new grad, you're speaking to someone who's been in the workforce for 5 years, and you're speaking to someone who's been in the workforce for 25 years. It's a pleasure to speak to someone who's also, been around and who's speaking to someone like yourself and, knows how to have a conversation. And then when you speak to someone who's maybe this is their first job and you hear the way they're speaking to you, you have to coach them. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
if you're going to have this conversation with someone who you're actually interviewing with or a company, you're going to have to do A, B, and C. And this is what you have to say. And you can't say things like this. And it's different for every person. And I've been in this business now for almost 8 years, and you see how things have changed. And I've been in workspaces where there's this is their first job out of college. And then you have the seasoned vets who've been doing this for 25 years. And then you have the people in the middle who've been, 5 to 10 years. And it's a multi-generational folks in one space. And you can kind of pool the talent from there. Like you have the folks like, all right, I think we should do this. And then you have Karen sitting next to me. Well, like, hey, I've done this 5 times or 6 times before with the same type of client. I think we should do this. Oh, okay. But if you don't have that, you don't have that camaraderie. So I love the generational talent.
Me too. Yeah, I think I
too.
think it's a huge opportunity, which I'll speak to in a second here. And Karen, what are you kind of see it from a little bit different than Josh, because you're more operations than recruiting, and you talk to a lot of clients, and in your career you've run call centers and some different things. So what do you see?
Yeah, what I really think just spoke true was Gen X or Gen Z and now Alpha will want to own their own companies and not go into an organization, because why make money for someone else? And I have seen that time and time again. I hire a lot of entry-level customer service, and my previous role was in sales. And I can't tell you how many people that didn't go straight to college and graduated high school and started their own thing. I mean, Noel, including your son. So it's interesting. That's something that is real. That's something that employers really need to think about and work around, because that's not changing. That is only evolving. That will only evolve with the alpha generation.
Right. So, I mean, one of the opportunities I see here, in regards to that, I see two opportunities for companies, for managers, for leaders. One is a cross mentoring situation where as the company, as the leader of the company or as the C-suite or as the managing, whatever you are in a company, that you can foster a culture of inclusion by helping people to mentor each other. So that would mean like the boomers and the Gen Xers are mentoring the younger generation, which is normally how it goes. But then on the flip side of that, the younger generation would be mentoring the older generation. So it's like in soft skills and how to communicate effectively and correctly, face to face, and that kind of human interaction that honestly in a lot of the younger generations is missing because they were raised by this. And, they are breaking up with girlfriends and boyfriends via text. That's how they're communicating. They'd rather get a text than a phone call. That's a different world than the world that I'm used to, or the one that I'm even comfortable with, because I'm just a person that likes that human connection. So we can teach them about that, and they can certainly teach us about technology and about thinking outside the box and about, corporate responsibility and what are you doing for the other people besides yourself. And so there can be a nice, healthy cross mentoring situation in a company that's paying attention, that actually makes it part of its culture. Josh.
Yeah, this just what you're saying just reminded me a lot of sports. And I don't know if we relate things to sports and business as much as we could.
Yeah.
But you look at like these basketball teams in the NBA and you're like, that's a really great team. And they're a young cast and their average age is 23. They're going to be great in a few years. And that's always the case. They're a really good team. They're going to be very good. And then you look at these older teams. They have their guys in their mid 30s or their low 30s, and they've been around the NBA for 5 to 10 years, and they're great. And then they bring on a veteran who's been there for 15 years, and he kind of like has that stranglehold in the locker room and brings them together from a culture perspective. And those are usually your winners. These young teams in sports, they're good, but they don't beat the teams that have veterans. It is what it is. It's like you don't have presence. And in the workplace,
that's a great analogy.
Great young culture, and everyone's been doing this for a few years, and they're good young minds, but you don't have that experience, and there's a disconnect. And I don't know how much we've really talked about it before, but I'm sure it correlates, and it has to.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Sad, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and Josh, the one challenge though is that we know that the older athletes come in recognizing that the younger athletes are there to replace them. That's the same issue in the workplace. And so there's that level of competition that I need to, job security. So as an organization, we have to break down that barrier to say, no, listen, we are here. We want you to end your career with us. So we'll say LeBron James, we want you to end your career with us. But in order for you to end your career and meet the goals that you have to meet, you have to mentor and train these new guys that we're bringing on to the Lakers, because that's important as well. You're not going to get the next championship without the rest of the team. And I think the bigger challenge is for those of us in that Gen X, because we are now entering that retirement age phase. And especially the boomers. Well, I'm not, because my son's not.
I'm never retiring. Okay. These guys right here are going to have to pry the computer and the phone out of the cold dead hand at like 102 or something.
That's definitely going to be me.
Yeah.
Because Matthew still has not gone to college. So, but to that end, we've got to figure out a way to make it, frankly, safe for someone to mentor, train, and not feel like they're, in essence, training their replacement. And the reason that exists is because that's what happened to baby boomers. And that's what boomers.
And that's what they think is going to happen.
That's what they think is going to happen.
So as the company, what we can do is, first of all, you could start to foster a conversation about legacy, right? Because what is your legacy? You can start talking to people about that, and I talk to people about that all the time, no matter how old you are. Like, let's start to think about, what is your legacy when you're not here anymore? What do you want to have done? What do you want to leave behind you? And most times that includes, for a large part, contributing, right? Because when I think about that, my legacy is these two right here. And the rest of the team that I'm privileged enough to be able to contribute to. you know, in the couple of different companies that I watch over. Like, to me, that's my highest and best use at this time in my life, is to pour everything I have into them and teach them how to lead well, so that they can then teach others how to lead well. Right? Because some of the things that you and I can bring to the table, said, are going to be lost if
Right.
we don't teach, because those things are not necessarily being taught anymore, except by people like us. So
Yes.
if people like us are being selfish and not leaning in to teaching others, then a lot of those things will be lost. And like Josh said, the real richness of a company is everything at the table,
Absolutely.
not just one thing or another thing. Because the young people, I never thought I'd be in a position where I would say that phrase even ever. Let me just say that. The younger generations, they're energetic, and they're brilliant, and however, they're not seasoned, and their intuition is not totally like on point yet, and they can't smell like something 60 miles away like we can. Right? And they don't have that gut reaction like we, because that only comes to you after so many decades in the field.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
you just, and that is just not something that you will get any other way.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
and I know we've talked about soft skills, and I see some of the comments as well, that when you think about it, young people today, like I took a typing class in high school.
Oh my God, I
I learned
remember
how to
those.
type.
Me too.
They don't offer that anymore.
No.
And yet every day in my classrooms, I've got students that have either laptops or tablets or a phone in front of them, but no one's ever taught them how to type. No one's really given them a hard red lined paper for grammar or for,
Right.
how sentence structure. And the challenge that we have is this: is sentence structure as important as sentence content?
Mm.
So what do we grade them on? What do we challenge them on? What is most important, right? Now, if you know this, Noel, when I send text messages, my English teacher would be proud of me. But my son, when he sends me a text message, they speak in a different language today than we did. And
Right? I'm
that's just
constantly
how
asking Antonio, what the hell does
what
that
is
mean?
all these
I'll
all
even
these
ask
acronyms?
Karen, what is that? Or I'll search on the internet, what does this
That's what I
slang
do.
abbreviation mean? I don't even know.
That's exactly what I do. But here's the challenge with that. As much as we want them to quote unquote spell it out, speak it in a language that we understand, ironically, that entire workforce understands that communication.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we want to focus on? Do we want to focus on them spelling it right, or do we want to focus on the content, and to your point, making sure that they can smell it 60 miles away
Yeah.
and work on their intuition?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the content is probably the most important thing, but then how do we build the soft skills so that way, they can have a conversation with a baby boomer, right? And it not be awkward for them. My
Right.
son, when we started our business, he was 3 years old, and he was in the office with us all the time. And so he's grown up around old people, as he says, all
Same
the
with Antonio, right?
yeah.
But it makes them better at their age. I mean, Antonio's so far ahead of the average 20-something-year-old because,
Right.
because
Well, that's genius.
when we and I did stuff, he was with me all the time,
Right.
Um,
I think that's more genetic than anything, Noel. I don't know if it was just because
I think that's so interesting. They say, I was reading something recently about this, and Gen Z, I always get it confused, Z and X. Gen Z thinks that adding periods to the end of sentences in emails or text messages is rude. And so they find that as rude. We find it as proper. They find it as rude. And it's just little things like that. And too much punctuation is rude, and it's too direct. And it goes back to like what you were saying in the beginning about when you were an intern, why did you have to wear a suit with no earring and a fully shaved face. It was because it was the old world of thinking. Now it's changed. And I think it's going to change a lot when it comes to the sentence structure and the way that we communicate in that way. It's the content that's more important, and the rest of it comes second. But ideally marrying the two. It's definitely interesting. It's interesting how the generations are different with that.
Well, I can tell you, I had a student submit an entire paper to me. It was an interview. So they were supposed to ask an entrepreneur a series of questions and then document the responses. I kid you not. They did text to talk. So they recorded, they text to talk, or they did a Zoom recording and they sent me the transcript. They didn't clean it up.
Paper.
Okay, that was their paper. So it was like, yeah. Okay. So I gotta ask you this next question, and what do you feel about? That was literally the entire paper, and I addressed it. But I also say I'm teaching entrepreneurship. I'm not teaching English, so I'm not here to grade your paper for grammar, for punctuation. I'm grading on the content. However, if you want to put your best professional foot forward, and you want to be taken seriously, you want to clean these things up, because this paper is a reflection of who you are as an entrepreneur. And if I'm an investor, would I invest in someone who didn't take the time to clean up a recorded message?
And so that's, we've got like 5 minutes left, because I like to try to keep to time for everybody that's kind of watching us on their lunch hour, if they are in fact watching us on their lunch hour. But so one point that I see that's poignant, and then I'm going to ask you guys all for advice to managers and leaders and folks about this multi-generational stuff. One thing I've noticed is that some of these younger generations have difficulty with confrontive conversations, and that really concerns me a lot. And that is honestly where I think those of us here on this call and going out there into the world, that is where we can do the most good. Because if you cannot communicate a difficult message to another human being, that's a life problem. That's not just a work problem. If you are unable to receive feedback that's constructive, and if you are unable to have difficult conversations, that's going to stop you in your whole life. That's something that's going to get in your way in any arena that you play in. And I see that a lot, because they're used to having a conversation like this, which, is, you can hide behind this to a certain extent, or hide behind your email or your app or your WhatsApp, Snapchat, all that stuff. You can hide there, and you don't have to be humble, and you don't have to be vulnerable, and you don't have to be completely authentic either. You can have this facade and put it into all these things and then function. However, I promise you, I don't care how amazing AI becomes, there's always going to be a time where you have to face another human being in your life and have a conversation. I'm sorry, but that is just how it's always going to be. So if you cannot have a conversation with someone that is uncomfortable, you're not going to be able to reach your full potential as a human being. So
keyboard warriors.
Huh? Yeah,
so right. Message to the keyboard warriors.
Yeah. So it's that's a real thing. Difficult conversations are part of the human experience.
I think, though, the challenge is model behavior.
Yeah.
I don't think that any generation has perfected taking constructive criticism well.
Yeah.
I think the model has always been, let me be defensive. Let me explain to you why your feelings are hurt, and that I didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
Josh and I are laughing because we had a difficult conversation yesterday. Him and I.
But that's the challenge. It's frankly a challenge.
Yeah,
I think true. And it's accountability on both parts, right? Because as the person that's getting the the conversation is directed towards, they feel a kind of way because they're like, wait, I thought I was good. And they may not feel comfortable taking accountability for their part, but then also the leader that's directing this to them at times also will not accept accountability for their role in that person not having a clear understanding of what was expected. So I think this is probably a 5-part conversation if you're trying to do this in 30 minutes.
Exactly. No,
but you're exactly right.
Probably a conversation about difficult conversation is another show. Karen and I, we keep coming up, we keep talking to people, and then we go, oh, that needs to be its own show. So we'll continue this conversation, maybe even with you, about difficult conversations, because I think that, Karen and I have both studied Brene Brown and her protocol in Dare to Lead. And I actually went through her training, not to be a facilitator, but just to be able to bring it, into my own team and into our own company culture. And, the rumbling, and also I'm a 5 behaviors practitioner, right? The 5 dysfunctions of a team. So that's, again, the confrontive conversation is one of the stages in that model. So that definitely will be another show. If you were coaching a company or a leader or just even a human being, what would each of you say for a piece of advice to embrace multi-generational diversity in your way of being? Sid, we'll start with you because you happen to be directly underneath me on this little. We look like the Hollywood squares here.
Yes, yeah.
Either
They're
that,
probably two. Do you guys even remember that? They're probably okay.
Yeah.
Either that or the Brady Bunch.
Sure.
We could be the Brady Bunch too. Oh goodness, I had something, but again, because of my age, it's gone. I would say expect the unexpected. I think if I'm a leader working with a variety or multi-generational team, I should not go in with expectations that this is what they're going to do, this is how they're going to act, this is how they're going to respond. I actually want to go in with the anticipation that I'm going to learn something new, that there's going to be an enlightenment that occurs because they're going to bring something else to the table that I might not have thought of. That's why I hired them. And so I think expecting the unexpected, and then frankly, challenging if they show up with the expected. I think that would create an environment where multi-generations would say, hey, I can show up and be authentically me. I can be vulnerable because my boss sees, or my leader, which I've been trying to change the terminology. So depending on how you treat them, I call you a boss or a manager, or I call you a leader. A leader would say, no, Noel, Karen, Josh, I want to know how you really feel about this. Don't give me what you think I need to hear. Right. Tell me exactly how this project makes you feel, what you see it doing to our customers, and what's most important, and what are we missing? And I think if you can be open from that perspective, and then, as they say, own your mess as a leader, that's when you will really gain the trust and, frankly, the commitment from multi-generations. That's what I do in my classroom. Yeah. I'm the bumbling professor. For the first few weeks, I tell them random stories about my wife and my son and all the mistakes I made along the way. And it's amazing how over the course of 3 to 4 weeks, they go from, being rigid to they come up to me after class and they're much more engaged with me because I'm real at that point.
Yeah, because you're right. You're willing to be vulnerable. Vulnerability in leadership is huge. That's absolutely a huge piece of it.
Even though I was born in the 1900s, they still see that they can relate to me.
Nice. Me. Josh, what's your piece of advice?
To seek advice from people with more experience than you.
Okay.
Not just asking your peers, but look for the person in the room who's maybe done it for a double or triple or quadruple. It doesn't matter how many more years of experience they have, and you seek advice from them and ask. And really, really, really seek it out.
Yeah. So be willing to learn, really, right?
From others, yeah, but others that have more experience than you.
I love that. Karen, what about you?
I think it's really important that organizations not only have a mentorship from the older generation to the new, but the newer generation to the older one.
Yes.
That may mend a lot of the mentorship that we're speaking of and teaching them skills.
Yeah.
And having to mentor an older generation. So I think that is very important for an organization, Joe, and embrace it.
Yeah. You remember that movie, The Intern, right? With Anne Hathaway and Robert De Niro.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic.
Great example of what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
You know? A great example. And, you know, a great example of valuing that too, because by the end of the movie, that was her trusted, you know, her trusted guy. And, you know, helped her navigate uncomfortable situations because he was comfortable with that. You know, those of us that are older, we're comfortable. I'm comfortable with an uncomfortable situation. I was trained on that stuff. Like I made my bones there. I know how to do that. You know? So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Sed, for your time. We're probably going to have you back so we can talk more about this whole, you know, about that other conversation that we think deserves its own show. Difficult conversations. All right. So where can they find you if they want to learn about you, or should they go to LinkedIn, or should they, where can they find out more? And when we put this up on YouTube, we'll put a little link to wherever you want us to link to. So what would you like us to link to?
Sure. I would say the best place to know me professionally is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Because that's where I post most. And I also have my Newbern Consulting page on LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
But I'm on all social media. So
I've seen you there.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us. We had a good time. We love this conversation. Multi-generational diversity is one of my new things. I really am interested in helping companies navigate that. And that's part of what we do at Staff Agency. So you can find out all about us at staffagency.com. You can also find us all on LinkedIn. And at roundtableshows.com, you can find past shows and how to get to the audio and how to get to the video and all of that. So we look forward to seeing you next week, and have a great week, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.